this is going to come out a few weeks late, but I am actually going to finish this video for once, instead of leaving it on the cutting room floor like the last couple. It's 2024, and once again we're back on Ravnica for like the 4th time now? Yep, that sounds about right. Now, Murders at Karlov Manor is our first clue-focused standard set, and so many of the commanders are doing things with clues. And my pick today from this set is no different, as we build a budget deck around the new Teysa Opulent Oligarch. Not only is Teysa a pretty crazy clue engine, but she's also the commander from the set for the Orzhov guild, which is one of my favourite guilds to build around. So for this deck list today, I want to build a really flavourful Orzhov deck around their best known mechanic, Extort. And that's one thing that works really well with Teysa, as Extort can let us trigger her clue ability for maximum effect each turn. Let's look at Teysa. She is a 2/3 human advisor for 1, a white and a black, with Death Touch, and at the beginning of your end step, investigate for each opponent who lost life this turn. Along with, whenever a clue is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, create a 1/1 white and black spirit creature token with flying, but this ability only triggers once per turn. So in Commander, for the low cost of having each opponent lose 1 life on your turn, you can create 3 clue tokens. Then, when you're cracking those tokens for cards, you'll make 1/1 spirits, though you'll have to crack them slowly due to the once per turn restriction. So it's pretty easy to be making 3 clues on your turn, as long as our deck is built around draining our opponent's life. Let's go over the Extort in the deck. For that, we have Thrall Parasite, Basilica Screecher, Syndic of Tithes, Tithe Drinker, Basilica Guards, Kingpin's Pet, Knight of Obligation, Syndicate Heavy, Cryptghast, Vizkopa Confessor, Pontiff of Blight, which gives all the creatures Extort, Treasury Thrall, Blind Obedience, and Life Insurance. With this much Extort, we can consistently get that trigger to enable our engine, and many of these cards come with extra helpful abilities as well, such as stacks or mana doubling. In a 4-player commander game, that Extort is also generating 3 life per trigger, since it gains from each opponent, unlike the newer effects where you only gain 1 life when they lose a life. But I don't just want to rely on Extort for this effect, so we have some other drain effects to go along with them. Sanctum of the Stone Fangs to drain a life each turn, Agent of the Iron Throne, and Nadia's Nightblade to drain when we sacrifice a clue, Sanguine Blood, Defiant Bloodlord, and Marauding Blight Priest to drain when we gain a life, Leech-Ridden Swamp for the ability on a land, Cruel Celebrant to drain when a creature dies, and of course Grey Merchant because it's the best drain effect on a creature. We also have both Ghost Councils for great flavour in the deck, and the drain effect they provide, and Cryptolith Fragment to deal a damage to everyone each turn. We also have Campbell, Consul of Allocation, which just hurts our opponents a lot over time, and we have Debt to the Deathless, a 4 mana and X drain spell that is basically the signature spell of the Orzhov. This is a really mana-hungry deck, if you hadn't noticed already. So we're going to have a lot of ramp, meaning this spell is basically a kill effect in the late game. Now, one card that stood out in that list is Sanguine Bond, which is part of the really well-known Exquisite Blood Sanguine Bond combo, where as soon as someone loses a life or gains a life, you'll gain infinite drain triggers. But Exquisite Blood is $15. However, I decided to make room in the budget to include it just for this deck. It's a pretty pricey combo mana-wise, however both sides are very powerful in this deck by themselves anyway, so I think this is just the sort of deck that would run this combo. It also makes this deck way more scary since it has a proper combo finish if it's not dealt with. Moving on, we should talk about the clue support, since that's the other half of this deck. Black and White isn't really known for its clue cards. It has some, but it's more of a blue-green thing. At least before this set anyway. We have Merchant of Truth to make some clues, but more importantly, give our clues Exalted to turn them all into extra damage on attacks. Syndicate Heavy, who can investigate if we gain enough life. Inspiring Sanctuary, which lets us turn those clues into mana. Tamio's Journal, so we can tutor with our clues. And Kaya Geist Hunter, who can double our clue generation. The deck is more focused on life drain rather than clues, so this feels like an appropriate amount of support for our clues. All those clues do make really good artifact sacrifice fodder though. So we've got a Braids to draw us cards from them, God Eternal Buntu to turn all of them into cards instantly, and Lich Knight's Conquest to do a mass reanimate with them. White and black don't really have good ways to reduce the cost of cracking clues, so this is kind of a fast way to get rid of all our clues off the board and get a lot of value out of them instantly. Sadly, Teysa's Spirit Token ability only triggers once per turn, so we aren't able to turn all those clues into tokens straight away, but I feel like this deck's strong enough anyway. Next up, we have a couple of other cards that haven't fitted into these sort of categories so far, with Nixos Paragon, which lets us put counters on everything once a turn when we gain a life. Soul Warden is a powerful life gain trigger piece. Herald of Anguish is a strong creature for our late game, and it should be cheap to cast with all our clues. And we have Diabolic Tutor so that we can have a tutor in the deck. If you're looking to improve on this deck, these are some easy cards you can pull out to put your own favourites in. And that sort of wraps up the unique stuff to this deck, because it's very straightforward. We're going to drain people and gain life and do as much of that as possible. So moving into our ramp pieces, we're going to need a big ramp package for this deck. Extort costs mana, cracking clues costs mana, and this deck just generally has a pretty high mana curve. So for that, we have Soul Ring, Arcane Signet, Orzhov Signet, Talisman of Hierarchy, Commander Sphere, Cryptolith Fragment, Pristine Talisman, Worn Power Stone, Hedron Archive, Thread Dynamo, Gilded Lotus, and Caged Sun. Now, I debated Caged Sun since we are a 2-colour deck, but it also makes the spirits bigger, and nearly all our lands tap for coloured mana, so it's going to be good. A lot of ramp still taps for colourless mana, which is a pain for our Extort, so you'll have to manage how you're tapping each turn so that you use the colourless first and save the coloured mana for your Extort triggers. This is a lot of ramp, and I'm telling you, you need it. I playtested this deck a whole bunch to make sure it could actually, cast everything I've put in it, and it was very mana hungry. The first couple of iterations just could not keep up with the amount of mana I needed each turn. Moving on, we'll talk about removal, and we have D-Spark, Generous Gift, Swords to Plowshares, Path to Exile, and Rite of Oblivion for targeted removal, and Kaya's Wrath, Austere Command, Merciless Eviction, and Blood Money for board wipes. Yeah, I know Blood Money isn't a very good board wipe. Feel free to swap it out with something else, but I think it's just so flavorful for the deck, so I had to include it in the list. Lastly, we have good old Soul Guide Lantern for cleaning up graveyards. It may be 2024, but I'm still going to recommend you run it. When it comes to card draw, well, we don't have a lot of that. Our commander is going to be making clues, and we have ways to turn those into cards with their normal ability, so for normal card draw, I've just put in Read the Bones. Again, I've done a fair bit of testing, and card draw really isn't an issue for this deck. If you're running short, you've got enough mana to turn those clues into cards, and it wasn't really a big problem. So that just leaves our lands, and for dual lands we have Caves of Kolos, Command Tower, Forsaken Sanctuary, Goldbriar Bridge, Orzhov Basilica, Orzhov Guildgate, Orzhova, the Church of Deals, Restless Fortress, Scoured Barrens, Sign Shadow Snarl, Silverquill Campus, Tainted Field, and Temple of Silence. Yes, there's a lot of tap lands here, but thanks to Caged Sun and our colour requirements, we want as many of both colours as possible across our lands so we don't get mana screwed, even if it does cost us a little bit of speed. For utility lands, we then have Bajuka Bog, Buried Ruin, Cascading Cataracts, Leech-Ridden Swamp, Myriad Landscape, and Witch's Cottage. We only have a few here, since mana colours are going to be way more important than utility pieces this time. And lastly, we round that out with 8 plains and 8 swamps for a balanced mana base. How does the deck play? Well, it's a slow, grinding deck. Every turn you'll drain a bit of life and develop your board. The aim being so you can stay alive long enough as you accumulate clues and mana until you hit one of your finishes like Debt to the Deathless, or Exquisite Blood, or Grey Merchant. In a 4-player game, each Extort trigger is going to gain back 3 life, which with a few drain effects can quickly start adding up each turn. It's also a very slow death to your opponents who normally won't start worrying until they're below 20 life, and you can drain them multiple times a turn. So for the first half of the game, most people are not going to be looking at you that badly. Teysa is also a great defender, as most people are hesitant to swing a powerful creature into a Death Touch commander. Flying of course will be a problem, but that's often true and that's what your instant speed removal is for. All in all, I'd rate this deck at probably about a 7 power level, with the drain being just a little bit slow to kill opponents, but with some strong finishes if you're left alone too long. Especially since we have a 2-card combo in the deck that will just end games. I think this new Teysa is exactly what an Orzhov themed deck really needed at the helm, and I had a lot of fun brewing this list. For upgrades on this deck, I'd really look into things like Academy Manufacturer to make treasures and food alongside your clues, more tutors to make those combos more consistent, the Meat Hook Massacre as a board wipe, and Shelter to the Apocalypse because it does everything this deck is trying to do, even though it costs more than this entire deck at this point. If you wanted to lean more into the life gain, Angel of Destiny would be a good player killer, same with Aether Flux Reservoir if you're into that sort of card. There's a lot of different ways you could take this deck, and most of them are going to work out pretty well if you can afford those more expensive cards. But that'll do for this video. So welcome to 2024, where hopefully we'll have some videos again, and thank you for watching.